It was one of those gray Portland afternoons when the sky looked like it had forgotten how to stop raining. Emma Carlyle sat alone in a corner cafe, her laptop open, a half-finished cup of coffee beside her. She had come there to work, or at least to pretend she was working. In truth, her mind was far away, tangled in thoughts she didn't want to face. Life had been moving in slow motion for her lately, filled with familiar routines and silent hours. She wasn't sad, exactly, just tired of waiting for something she couldn't name. The bell above the cafe door rang sharply as a man rushed in, carrying an old camera bag and shaking off the rain from his coat. He looked around, scanning for an empty seat, but every table was full except the one across from her. Their eyes met for a brief second, his warm and searching, hers cautious but curious. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice polite, calm, but edged with the kind of exhaustion that comes from long days and longer thoughts. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." He sat down, placed his camera bag on the floor, and sighed quietly. For a moment, they didn't speak. The sound of rain filled the space between them, steady and soft. Then he smiled, a quick, almost shy smile that made him look younger. "Thanks," he said. "Didn't expect the place to be this packed." "It's always like this when it rains," Emma replied, closing her laptop just slightly. "People run from the weather, but end up stuck together." He laughed under his breath. "That's one way to look at it." Something in the way he spoke caught her attention. Not his words, but the way they carried a quiet sincerity. He wasn't trying to impress her, just talking, simply, honestly. It had been a long time since Emma had felt that from anyone. After a few minutes, conversation began to flow naturally. His name was Ryan, a freelance photographer who had recently moved to the city after traveling across the Pacific Northwest for a project. He told her about chasing sunsets on the coast, sleeping in his van by the ocean, and how photography wasn't just a job for him, but a way to feel connected to the world. Emma listened, drawn in despite herself. She wasn't usually quick to open up to strangers, but there was something grounding about him. Maybe it was his calmness, or the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about light and timing, things she'd never really thought about before. When he asked what she did, she hesitated. "I'm a writer," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Well, I used to write more than I do now." "What stopped you?" She looked down at her coffee, swirling the last bit around the cup. "Life, I guess. Deadlines, bills, not believing in my own words anymore." Ryan leaned forward slightly. "You should write anyway, even if no one reads it. Sometimes it's just about remembering who you are." It wasn't advice, it was something truer, something she hadn't realized she needed to hear until that moment. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, time seemed too slow. The cafe was still buzzing with quiet conversations and soft music. But for Emma, it felt like the world had narrowed to that small table, that quiet stranger, and the warm air between them. Ryan glanced toward the window and smiled. "You know, I love days like this," he said. "Everyone hides from the rain, but that's when everything looks most alive. The reflections, the colors, they change." Emma followed his gaze. The streets outside shimmered like a painting. She hadn't noticed before. She had been too busy staring at her screen, counting hours, counting reasons. "Do you always see the world like that?" she asked softly. He thought for a moment. "Only when I remember to slow down." That line stayed with her, simple but full of meaning. She realized she had been living on autopilot for months, maybe years. Listening to him talk felt like someone opening a window in a room she didn't know had grown so quiet. They talked for nearly an hour. About small things. About everything. He told her he had once photographed a lighthouse during a storm and almost lost his camera to the wind. She told him she once drove across 3 states just to see a meteor shower that never appeared. They both laughed. It felt easy. Unexpectedly easy. When Ryan finally checked his watch, surprise crossed his face. "Didn't mean to steal your afternoon," he said with a small grin. "You didn't," Emma said. "It's been nice, nice." He repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's rare these days." He stood, slinging his camera bag over his shoulder. The rain had lightened, the street outside washed clean. He turned back to her, his eyes catching the light. Funny how some storms make you stop long enough to notice what matters. Emma didn't reply. She didn't know what to say. Maybe I'll see you here again, he said. And then he was gone, disappearing into the misty gray outside, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and coffee for a while. She just sat there, her laptop still open but forgotten. She could hear the soft hum of music and the steady drip of rain from the awning outside. And though nothing extraordinary had happened, no promises, no exchanged numbers, no plans, she felt something stirred deep within her. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something smaller, quieter, the flicker of curiosity, the start of hope. She had met someone who made her see the world differently, even if just for an hour. When she finally packed her things and stepped out of the cafe, the city smelled of rain and renewal. The sidewalks glistened beneath streetlights, and the air felt lighter somehow as she walked home. Emma thought about Ryan's words. Some storms make you stop long enough to notice what matters. Maybe he was right. Maybe life wasn't always about chasing something new. Maybe it was about pausing long enough to see what's right in front of you, a moment, a smile, a stranger who felt like someone you might have known in another life. She reached her apartment, set her bag down, and glanced at the fogged-up window. The rain had almost stopped, but drops still slid down the glass in slow motion. She felt calm more than she had in months. Emma didn't know if she'd ever see him again. Maybe it was just a single chapter, short, unfinished. But as she sat there, replaying that quiet hour in her mind, she realized something unexpected. She liked it. The uncertainty, the sudden warmth, the feeling of being alive again. And for the first time in a long while, she opened her laptop, not to work, not to force words out, but to write about that afternoon, about a stranger, a storm, and the way something small can shift your entire heart without warning. She titled the page simply, "The Unexpected Encounter," and she smiled, because she didn't expect it. But she liked it so much. The days after that rainy afternoon passed quietly, yet something had changed for Emma Carlyle. The world felt a little different, softer, lighter, more awake. She didn't know why a single conversation with a stranger had affected her so deeply, but it had. Every time she walked past the cafe, she caught herself glancing through the window, wondering if Ryan might be there again, camera by his side, that half-smile waiting. Then one Saturday morning, she saw him. He was sitting at their old table, a cup of coffee, and his camera laid out like it was part of him. When their eyes met, he smiled, that calm, easy smile that somehow made everything around him slow down. "Hey," he said when she walked in. "Thought you might have stopped coming here." "I almost did," she admitted, setting her things down across from him. "But then I realized I kind of liked the coffee here after all." He chuckled. "So it's the coffee, not the company." "Maybe both," she said, smiling despite herself. From then on, the cafe became their quiet meeting place. They didn't plan it. Sometimes they'd bump into each other by accident. Other times, one of them would text a simple, "You around?" And somehow they always were. Ryan carried his camera everywhere. He'd show her pictures he'd taken a street musician playing under a bridge, kids chasing pigeons downtown, a woman laughing under a broken umbrella. Emma loved how he saw beauty in ordinary things. He'd say, "It's not about the picture. It's about the feeling you had when you took it." One afternoon, she asked him to show her how to use his camera. They went outside under a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain again. He showed her how to hold it steady, how to find light, how to notice what others didn't. "Don't just look," he said softly, standing beside her. "See?" His voice was close, warm, steady. She could feel his presence more than his words, and for a brief moment, the rest of the world disappeared. When she lowered the camera and looked at him, he was already watching her, that small smile playing on his lips. It made her heart beat faster, unfamiliar, unexpected, but real. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. They shared stories about their childhoods, the people they used to be, and the dreams they once chased. Emma told him about her unfinished book, a collection of short stories she'd stopped writing years ago. Ryan told her about the night he decided to leave his stable job to follow photography full-time. "It was terrifying," he said, "but I figured regret would hurt worse." Those words stayed with her. Ryan seemed fearless in ways she wasn't. He moved through life with quiet confidence, trusting moments instead of plans. Emma admired that, and maybe she envied it too. Still, she tried not to let her feelings grow too much. She had been here before, hope that turned into heartbreak, beginnings that faded before they had a chance to bloom. She told herself this was just friendship, but deep down, she knew it was more. The way her heart lifted when she saw him, the way his messages made her smile, it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. One rainy evening, Ryan invited her to an art exhibit downtown. "It's a local show," he said over coffee. "Some of my photos are being featured. You should come." Emma hesitated. Crowds made her nervous, and being part of his world, the creative, confident one, scared her even more. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not really the art gallery type." Ryan looked at her with gentle understanding. "You don't have to be. Just come see what I see." His voice had a quiet sincerity that made it hard to say no. The night of the exhibit, Emma stood outside the gallery for a full minute before going in. The warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, and music drifted out the door. Inside, people were laughing, holding glasses of wine, admiring the walls filled with photographs. She spotted Ryan across the room, talking to a small group. He looked completely in his element, calm, relaxed, his camera slung casually over his shoulder. When he saw her, his face lit up. He excused himself and walked over. "You came," he said, genuinely surprised. "I did," she said, smiling nervously. "It's beautiful in here. I'm glad you think so." He guided her toward the wall displaying his photographs. Emma looked around, quietly amazed. His photos were raw and alive. People, places, fleeting moments that somehow felt personal. Each one told a story. As she walked along the wall, she stopped suddenly. There, among the photos, was one that took her breath away. It was her sitting by the cafe window the same day they met. The light had caught her face just right. Her expression soft and lost in thought. Underneath, a small card read, "Stillness found." Emma froze. For a moment, she couldn't move. Ryan stood beside her, watching her reaction. "I didn't mean to surprise you," he said quietly. "I took it that first day. I wasn't even sure I'd keep it, but it just felt right." She turned toward him, heart racing. "You photographed me." "I did," he said, honest and calm. "You looked like someone trying to remember how to breathe again." That moment felt real. She stared at the photograph of herself through his eyes. It wasn't how she usually saw her reflection. There was peace in it, a softness she didn't know she still had. For the first time in years, she saw herself not as tired or lost, but as someone worth noticing. "You make things look beautiful," she whispered. Ryan smiled faintly. "I don't make them that way. I just notice when they already are." Something inside her cracked open, not in pain, but in quiet recognition. She had spent so long doubting herself, living small, afraid to be seen. And yet this man had noticed her on an ordinary day, doing nothing special, and somehow found beauty there. They stood there for a while, surrounded by laughter and light, saying nothing more. It wasn't a confession or a promise, just a moment that said everything without words. Later that night, as they walked out into the cool air, Emma looked up at the city lights reflecting on the wet streets. Ryan walked beside her, not touching her, not rushing, just there. "You know," she said softly, "I almost didn't come tonight." He glanced at her. "I'm glad you did. So am I." They reached the corner where their paths split. For a moment, they just stood there, the sound of distant traffic and rain between them. Ryan smiled. "Same time at the cafe tomorrow." Emma hesitated, pretending to think. "Maybe, if the coffee's still good." He laughed. "It always is." As she walked away, her chest felt full, not with certainty, but with something tender and alive. She didn't expect this connection to grow, didn't plan for it. Yet she couldn't deny it anymore. Something gentle, real. and unexpected was pulling her toward him. And though she didn't know where it would lead, she liked the way it felt more than she ever thought she would. The next few days after, the art exhibit felt different for Emma. The image of that photograph, her face caught in quiet reflection, wouldn't leave her mind. Every detail of that evening replayed in fragments. Ryan's soft voice beside her. The way the light from the gallery fell across his eyes. The way the world seemed to fade when he said, "I just notice when they already are." It wasn't just about the picture. It was about how he saw her and how that changed the way she saw herself. She hadn't expected it to matter that much, but it did. She found herself walking lighter, her thoughts calmer. Even the mornings felt gentler. Maybe it was him, or maybe it was the way he made her remember what it felt like to be alive. Ryan kept showing up in the most effortless way. He'd text her photos of the sunrise over the Willamette River, a stray cat sitting on a railing, a reflection in a puddle. Always simple moments, but always beautiful. And sometimes he'd send no words at all, just the photo, as if to remind her that silence could be meaningful. And Emma began writing again. Not full stories, just small pieces, reflections, lines, moments. She'd sit in that cafe and let the words spill out, unsure of where they'd go. Ryan never asked to read them, and that made her trust him more. He never pushed. He just let her be. One crisp Sunday morning, he asked her to come with him to the park. "There's this spot I've been trying to photograph," he said. "You might like it," she agreed. And they drove to a quiet place by the river where the autumn leaves were starting to fall. The air smelled of pine and rain. Ryan carried his camera. She carried coffee for both of them. They walked down a trail lined with golden trees, until they reached a wooden bridge. "This is it," he said it. Wasn't anything spectacular, just an old bridge with chipped paint and a gentle stream. Below, but under Ryan's gaze, it seemed magical. He crouched, adjusting his camera, chasing light and angles, his focus so deep that he barely spoke. Emma watched him, smiling. There was something peaceful about the way he worked, as if he belonged to the moment completely at one point. He looked up at her and said, "Stand there, just for a second." She froze. "Me?" He nodded, gesturing to the bridge. "You don't have to pose. Just stand how you are." She hesitated, then did as he asked. The wind moved her hair, the light brushed her face. And for a few seconds, there was silence. Just the click of his camera and the soft rush of the river when he lowered the camera. He said quietly, "Perfect." Emma felt her heart race, though she didn't know why. It was just a photo, but with him, nothing ever felt just anything afterward. They sat on a bench, sipping their coffee and watching the water. Ryan told her about the places he still wanted to see, the deserts of Arizona, the mountains of Montana, maybe even Alaska one day. She listened, smiling. "You make it sound like the world is endless." "It kind of is," he said, "but only if you let it be." She looked at him then, realizing he wasn't just talking about travel. He was talking about life and maybe even about her. When he dropped her home later, she lingered at the car door. "Thanks for today," she said softly. Ryan smiled. "You don't have to thank me for sharing something real." That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about his words, his photographs, the way he looked at her like he was memorizing something precious. It scared her, not because it felt wrong, but because it felt right. A week later, Ryan texted her again. "Can you meet me at the gallery tonight?" Emma hesitated but said yes. When she arrived, the place was quiet, the exhibit was over, but some of the photos still hung on the walls. Ryan was standing near one of them, adjusting the frames. His back turned to her. "You're early," she said, her voice echoing softly in the empty space. He turned and smiled. "Couldn't wait." They walked along the wall, talking quietly. Then he stopped in front of a new photograph. Emma's breath caught again. It was her, the one from the bridge. The golden light, her hair moving in the breeze, a soft, thoughtful expression on her face. Beneath it, a small label read, "The moment between." She looked at it, her throat tightening. "You took this that day?" "Yeah," he said, his tone gentle. I wasn't planning to add it here, but it felt like it belonged. She stared at the photo, her emotions tangled, surprise, warmth, disbelief. It wasn't vanity. It was vulnerability. He had captured her not in perfection, but in truth. Raw, present, unguarded. "You always make me look so calm," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's because you are. When you stop trying to be something else." For a long moment, they stood there, the silence between them filled with everything they weren't saying. Then Ryan spoke softly. "Do you ever feel like something's meant to find you, even when you're not looking?" Emma met his eyes. "Maybe, but it's hard to believe in things like that." He nodded slowly. "Me too, until now." Her breath caught. It wasn't a confession, not yet. But it was close enough to make her heart stumble. They left the gallery and walked through the quiet city streets. The air smelled of rain again, the pavement glistening under the streetlights. Every step felt charged with something unspoken. At a crosswalk, Emma stopped. "You know," she said softly, "I didn't expect any of this. You, the cafe, that photo." Ryan turned to her, eyes steady. "Neither did I." There was a pause, the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. Then he smiled faintly. "But I like it." She smiled back. "Yeah, me too." When they reached her street, he didn't follow her up. He just looked at her like he wanted to remember the moment. "You should keep writing," he said quietly. "Whatever it is you're feeling, it's worth putting down." She nodded, unable to speak. When she went inside, her heart was racing. She leaned against the door, closed her eyes, and let the moment sink in. She wasn't sure what this was becoming, friendship, love, or something in between, but it felt real. And that was enough. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began to type. Not about Ryan directly, but about what it felt like to be seen without explanation. She wrote about stillness, light, and the quiet courage it takes to be open again. The words came easily, this time soft, alive, honest. She didn't care if anyone ever read them. Outside, the city lights flickered across her window. Somewhere out there, Ryan was probably walking home, camera in hand, chasing another fleeting moment. And as she wrote, Emma realized something simple but true. She didn't expect this connection, this awakening, this strange, beautiful pull. But she liked it so much. More than she had words for. Winter came early that year, wrapping Portland in soft gray clouds and slow rain. Emma could feel the seasons settling not only in the air but in her heart. The city moved slower, quieter, and so did she. But every quiet moment reminded her of Ryan. His laughter, his camera always slung across his shoulder. The way he made even silence feel full. They still met at the cafe, though not as often as before. Ryan had been busy working on a new project that had him traveling more. He'd come in with stories from small towns, ocean cliffs, and misty mountains, showing her photographs that looked like dreams. Emma loved hearing him talk about them, but each story carried a shadow, something she didn't want to name yet. One evening, as the rain tapped gently against the cafe window, Ryan sat across from her, quieter than usual. His coffee had gone cold and his eyes seemed far away. "You're leaving," she said softly, not as a question, but as a truth she already knew. He looked up, surprised she had said it out loud. "Yeah," he admitted. "I got offered a photography assignment in Montana. It's big. A few months at least." Emma's chest tightened. She forced a small smile. "That's amazing. You deserve it." "Yeah," he said again, but his voice wasn't full of excitement. "It's just hard to leave things behind when they start feeling like home." She looked at him then, really looked the curve of his tired smile, the gentleness in his eyes, the way his fingers tapped nervously against the mug. Her throat ached. "You'll come back," she said, trying to sound sure. "I will," he promised. Though they both knew promises could change with distance. The next few days passed quietly. Emma wrote more, filling her notebook with words she couldn't say out loud. She didn't want to make his leaving heavier. She wanted him to go with hope, not guilt. Still, the thought of not seeing him at that cafe, the thought of him not being just a call away, hurt more than she expected. On his last night in Portland, Ryan asked to see her. They met at the cafe again, their table by the window, waiting as if it had been saving their place. Outside, the rain fell softly, the same kind of rain as the night they met. They talked about everything except what mattered most. About the weather, about the city, about how she finally started writing again. Ryan listened, smiling, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes. When the conversation faded, he reached into his camera bag and pulled out an envelope. "For you," he said. Emma frowned slightly, taking it. "What is it?" "Just something to remember me by," he said. "But don't open it now, later." She turned the envelope in her hands, feeling its weight. "You know, I'm bad at goodbyes," she said. Ryan smiled softly. "Then don't say one. Just, see you later." There was a pause, a long, gentle silence that said everything words couldn't. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. It wasn't dramatic, just a touch, steady, warm, familiar. "You changed something in me, Emma," he said quietly. "You made me slow down. You made me see what I was missing." Her eyes stung. "You made me remember what it feels like to be seen," she whispered. He stood, reluctant but resolute. "I'll come back," he said again. "I'll be here," she replied, her voice trembling. Then he leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers. Not a kiss, just a moment of closeness that carried more meaning than any word could. And then he was gone. The door closed softly behind him. The bell chimed once. And just like that, the cafe felt bigger, emptier. Emma sat there long after he left, the envelope still in her hand. The rain fell harder now, streaking the window like quiet tears. She finally opened it. Inside was a small photograph, black and white, simple, timeless dot. It was her, once again, but this time she wasn't looking out a window or lost in thought. She was laughing, genuine, free, unguarded. Across the bottom, written in Ryan's careful handwriting, were 3 words: "Keep this light." She pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. It wasn't sadness she felt. It was gratitude for the timing, the moments, the way something small had become so meaningful. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Winter melted into spring. Life went on. She worked, wrote, met friends, and still visited the cafe sometimes. Every so often, she'd sit at their old table and imagine him walking through the door again, camera in hand. That soft grin lighting up his face. They didn't talk much while he was away. A few messages, a photo from his trip, a voice note about how beautiful the mountains looked at sunrise. His words were short, but they always made her heart ache in that quiet, the familiar way. One afternoon, she received a package in the mail with no return name, just his handwriting. Inside was a small photo book titled "Stillness, Found." The first page was a note for Emma. "Some people help you see the world differently. You help me see myself." Ryan tears filled her eyes as she flipped through the pages. There were photos of nature, strangers, quiet city corners, and scattered between them, small moments of her hands on a coffee cup, her reflection in a cafe window, her smile under sunlight. Each image told a story, and every story carried the same feeling: warmth, peace, connection. Emma closed the book, holding it close. She realized something profound. Love wasn't always about staying. Sometimes it was about being changed by someone's presence. No matter how long they stayed in your life. That night, she walked to the river where they'd once taken photos together. The water shimmered under the moonlight, the wind soft against her face. She sat on the bench they'd shared, pulled out the photo he'd given her, and smiled. For a while, she just sat there listening to the city, the river, the quiet rhythm of her own heart. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was remembering, grateful for what had been, and open to what might come next, months later. One early morning, she returned to the cafe. The air smelled of fresh rain, just like that first day. She took her usual seat by the window and opened her notebook. Before she could start writing, the bell over the door rang. She looked up and froze. There he was, Ryan, standing in the doorway. Camera bag over his shoulder, same quiet smile. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he walked toward her, eyes warm, steady. "Hi," he said softly. She smiled. "Hi." He sat down across from her, as if no time had passed. Outside, the rain began again, soft, familiar, endless. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. She reached into her notebook, pulled out the photograph he'd given her, and placed it on the table between them. "I kept the light," she said. Ryan looked at the picture, then at her. "I knew you would." And for the first time in a long time, Emma realized something simple and true. Life doesn't always go how you expect, but sometimes what you find along the way stays with you forever. She didn't expect this, but she liked it so much, and she always would.